The night I realized I was in love with her, everything felt wrong. Not just complicated, wrong in a way that made my chest tighten and my thoughts spiral. Because she wasn't just anyone, she was her, the girl I had watched grow up, the one who used to run around in mismatched shoes and laugh with scraped knees and messy hair. She was my best friend's little sister, and that night changed everything. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the messy beauty of human emotions, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this matter, and your support keeps them alive. I had known her since she was 7. Back then, she was just a shadow trailing behind her older brother, my best friend. We spent most of our teenage years together, late-night gaming, stupid dares, long talks about dreams we barely understood. And she was always there in the background, peeking into the room, asking annoying questions, trying to be included. We never really took her seriously. To us, she was just a kid. But time has a quiet, unsettling way of changing things when you're not paying attention. By the time I was 24, life had already started pulling me in different directions. My best friend had moved away for work, chasing a career he always wanted. I stayed back, stuck somewhere between responsibilities and uncertainty. His house, once loud and full of life, had grown quieter. His parents were often busy, and somehow I found myself visiting less for him and more out of habit. Or maybe something else I didn't want to admit. She was no longer that little girl. The first time I really noticed it wasn't even dramatic. It was ordinary, almost forgettable. She was standing in the kitchen, sunlight catching in her hair, laughing at something her mother said. But there was something different in that moment. Something that didn't fit into the image I had of her. She had grown into someone I didn't recognize anymore, and that realization made me uncomfortable. I started avoiding eye contact, keeping conversations short, reminding myself over and over that she was off limits, not just morally but emotionally. She wasn't someone I was supposed to see that way. She belonged to a part of my life that was simple, innocent, untouched. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more aware I became of her presence. Her voice lingered longer than it should have. Her laughter felt heavier, like it carried something deeper beneath it. Even silence with her felt different. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, until that night. It had been raining all evening, one of those slow, relentless storms that make the world feel smaller. I had stopped by their house unexpectedly just to drop something off. I wasn't planning to stay, but the rain had other plans. Roads flooded, thunder cracking through the sky, and her parents were stuck somewhere out of town. It was just the two of us. That alone should have been enough to make me leave, but I didn't. We sat in the living room, the dim yellow light flickering as the power threatened to go out. At first, everything felt normal, casual, safe. We talked about small things, work, her studies, how her brother was doing in another city. But slowly, the conversation changed. It shifted into something deeper, something heavier. She started talking about feeling lost, about the pressure of expectations, about how everyone still saw her as that little girl who didn't know anything. She laughed while saying it, but there was something fragile underneath, something that made it hard to look away. For the first time, I wasn't seeing her as my friend's little sister. I was seeing her as a person, and that scared me. The storm outside grew louder, as if it mirrored the tension building inside me. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I tried to keep things light, to steer the conversation away from anything that felt too real. But she didn't let it go. She looked at me in a way she never had before, steady, searching, almost like she was trying to understand something she had been holding back for a long time. And then she said something that shattered whatever fragile boundaries I had left. She told me she had always trusted me more than anyone else, that I was the only person who had never treated her like she didn't matter. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't romantic, but it hit harder than anything else could have, because in that moment, I realized I had been lying to myself. This wasn't just confusion, it wasn't just nostalgia or misplaced feelings. It was real, and I didn't know what to do with it. The power went out shortly after, plunging the room into darkness. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The only sound was the rain and our breathing, too loud, too close. I remember thinking, this is where everything changes. And it did, not in a sudden, explosive way, not in something you could easily point to and say, this was the moment, but in something quieter, deeper, something that settled into my bones and refused to leave. We sat there in the dark, talking more honestly than we ever had before, about fears, regrets, things we never said out loud. And somewhere in between those words, something shifted between us. something irreversible. By the time the lights came back, nothing felt the same. I left soon after. But I didn't leave that night behind. The days that followed were unbearable in a way I hadn't expected. Everything felt normal on the outside, but inside, I was constantly at war with myself. I tried to distance myself again, convincing myself that it had just been a moment, a temporary lapse in judgment caused by the storm, the darkness, the vulnerability. But deep down, I knew better. You don't just forget something like that. You don't unfeel what has already taken root. And the worst part was, I didn't know if she felt it too. We didn't talk about that night. Not directly, but there was a new tension in every interaction, a quiet awareness that lingered beneath even the simplest conversations. Sometimes our eyes would meet for a second too long, and it felt like everything we weren't saying was louder than anything we could. It was confusing, painful, beautiful in a way I didn't want to admit. I started pulling away again, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I told myself I was protecting something, my friendship, her future, the version of life that made sense. But the truth was simpler than that. I was afraid of crossing a line I couldn't come back from, afraid of losing everything, and maybe, most of all, afraid that I wasn't wrong, that what I felt wasn't temporary, that it wasn't something I could just walk away from. Weeks passed like that, and then one day she stopped reaching out. No messages, no casual check-ins, no accidental encounters. At first I told myself it was for the best, that this distance was necessary. But slowly that silence started to feel heavier than anything else. Because losing her, even like this, felt worse than the confusion I had been running from. That's when I realized something I should have understood much earlier. Some connections don't fit into neat categories. Some feelings don't follow rules. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't deciding what's right or wrong. It's deciding what you're willing to lose. I went back to her house one evening not knowing what I would say, not knowing if I even had the right to say anything. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending that none of it mattered. She opened the door, and for a moment, everything felt exactly the same, and completely different. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just my struggle, she had been carrying it too. Before we reach the ending, if this story has touched something inside you even a little, please like, comment, and share your thoughts. It truly helps more than you realize. And before the final moment, I have a small request. Comment the word understood if you've ever felt something you couldn't explain, something that changed you forever. We didn't say much at first. We didn't need to, because sometimes the most important things are already understood. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if what we felt that night will turn into something lasting, or something we'll both look back on as a turning point in our lives. But I do know this. That night didn't just change how I saw her. It changed how I saw myself. It forced me to confront feelings I didn't want, truths I wasn't ready for, and choices I couldn't avoid. And maybe that's what makes it so unforgettable. Not the romance, not the tension, but the honesty. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments in life aren't the ones that give you answers. They're the ones that leave you asking questions you can't ignore. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real change begins.